Hey, good morning, Daniel.
Hey, how's it going?
Very good, thank you. How have you been?
Pretty good. Can't complain. It's Friday.
Okay, great. It's Friday. Yeah, yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for taking time. Looking forward to this chat. Let's just get started by having you do a quick intro of yourself, the kind of work that you do, right? The company you represent, and things like that.
Sure, yeah. Well, my name is Daniel Englebretson. I am a career marketer, if you will. I got my degree in marketing and I've been in marketing ever since. So I mostly have been in demand generation. I have different flavors of that where at one point in time I was responsible for a sales team. I've also been responsible for a BDR team, responsible for design teams, so kind of all the different flavors of what you might be doing in a demand generation role, mostly at large Fortune 500 companies, lean manufacturers. But
Hmm.
I did a stint at VC-backed startups and kind of lived that life a little bit too. And a few years ago, decided to put all that practice to use and started up a company. And now I spend my days helping other people start up and run demand generation and ABM businesses.
Awesome. Perfect recipe to be an ABM practitioner and expert, I guess, right? So you have the sales and marketing expertise, which is good, and by education too, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
worked out well.
I, Right. And how did you get into ABM? So it's a natural progression, or is this an area that you found it interesting and then you moved on to it, or how did it go and how did it happen?
Yeah, I would say it was kind of a natural progression, as you said with the intro here about running sales and marketing. If your job is to get leads for your sales team, and you own the sales team, and your sales team's job is to close those leads, then you're pretty motivated to get the right leads for your sales team. And that's how I started my
Hmm.
career, like literally my first job. And so I always felt the pain of a bad lead. I always got the feedback of these leads aren't good if they weren't good. And so I was always very motivated to solve for that. So as the kind of technology categories kicked in around ABM, I was a big marketing automation practitioner when I first kind of stumbled across account-based marketing tech a long time ago, like 2015 or 16. And the tech just made a lot of the processes make like fit together better, I guess. The processes of generating the lead and driving the lead
Hmm.
to where it needed to go. So that aspect certainly started out account based, or certainly started out demand gen, lead gen. But then along the way, if you spend any time generating leads for sales teams, you start building those relationships and you start to value that alignment in those relationships. And so for me, account based marketing rapidly became just doing better work for the people who I'm friendly with at my company, basically. And so I
Hmm.
was always motivated to
Hmm.
help them do better. So that was kind of how I fell into ABM, and it just made sense for how we approached what we did. I've often worked at large
Hmm.
manufacturers where they have strong product marketing, product management functions, and
Hmm.
product management is in a big way about who should I be targeting and why, and what should my product features look like and things like that. So when you're kind of directed by product managers and you're surveying a sales team, it's a natural thing, ABM. So
Hmm.
so that's kind of how I got going on it, and I was a Terminus adopter back in 16, and I bought Terminus 3 or 4 times over the years before I started my thing, and because I moved around to different jobs and stuff. So that's kind of how I fell into it. And then, I started doing podcasts and speaking engagements and stuff, and one thing led to the next, and here we are. So,
Awesome. You used a term called friendly, right? Referring to
yeah.
sales and marketing. That's not something that like oftentimes goes hand in hand, right? And that is something that's very important for any ABM program to be successful. How do you drive that like friendliness between teams, right? So when, especially in large companies where people are used to be working in certain cultures, silos, right? And how do you like do that enablement, which I think is like super important before you actually start like implementing your ABM programs.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to give you my retroactive look at it, and then I'll give you the look at how I actually did
Okay.
it the first time. But looking back at it, the most
Hmm.
important thing is empathy. I think empathy for the problems that your peers or your cross-functional kind of business partners are dealing with. And one of the big problems that lies between that sales and marketing relationship is sales has quarterly goals that they have to hit. And if they're not hitting them in a
Hmm.
quarter, and they're getting a lot of pressure because they're not hitting them in that quarter, and you're sending them stuff that's wasting your time, it creates a lot of angst. And so I think retrospectively, the most important thing as a marketer you need to do to build that alignment is to understand what are truly what are sales team's goals, and what can you do to actually help them achieve those goals. And if you focus on understanding that and trying to dial in your efforts for that, you can start to build goodwill and traction with your sales team. But at the same time, on the sales side of the house, you have to have sales leadership that's willing to play along. And sometimes what you find is sales leadership isn't bought in, or they don't understand, or you haven't explained it to them, or whatever. For whatever reason, they're not bought in on spending their team's time on what
Hmm.
you're doing. And so
Right.
that's where a lot of the problem comes in. So building those bridges by understanding what they're actually trying to achieve and dialing in for that uh, is, I think, a good place to start on that. Because at the end of the day, those people will lose their jobs if they don't hit their numbers. And
Hmm.
marketers don't lose their jobs if they don't hit their numbers. It's a different dynamic. So you just have to know that, and you have to be thinking about that. But I can tell you the reverse of that is, if you're just getting started on this, what I found is either A, find a salesperson in the organization who's open to it. Usually they're hungry, they're newer, they're looking for ways to get a leg up, and find somebody who's willing to kind of help you champion it, and then build your engine around driving leads to that person, even if you're not doing
Hmm.
that officially, so that you can start to get
Hmm.
feedback from your sales partners, so that you know what's good and what's not good. Because that feedback that comes back from that salesperson is super valuable, helping you understand, what do I actually need to deliver to sales. And so if you start with somebody who's willing and then scale from there, that's an excellent place to start. And then lastly, because this is a complicated subject, if you can't get anybody at all and nobody wants to talk to you, and you're still trying to get started and nobody's friendly, the best way is with data. And so you sit
Hmm.
down and with whoever you can internally, even if it's just yourself, and you work out what does make sense from an ideal customer profile, from a persona, from a positioning perspective. What really does make sense? Do what you got to do to run that effort in an account-based way, even
Hmm.
if you're doing the same tactics you always do, even if it's just email or ads or whatever. Do that work, set up your target account list, run your programs against that target account list, even if it's just a subset of what you're doing. Get the data from that, and that data is going to tell you, oh, you were able to engage these accounts this much, they engaged back this much, they took these actions. And once you do that for 30 or 60 or 90 days, you bring that data back to the org and you say, hey, I ran this account-based pilot. We had 45% of the target account list engaged. Here are the 100 accounts that I picked. Check this out. They were all over this, that, and the other. And then the team's going to say, oh, I didn't know you could do that, or I didn't know I could see those numbers, or how did you pick those 100 accounts? And that conversation changes from this dream of ABM to, I have real data
Hmm.
at real target account lists that I can react to.
Interesting. So you talked about bridging this functional gaps, right? Whose job ideally should it be? It's almost that, like in all of these conversations, right? It's like I did some sort of a hack to make sure I identify that right person who's open, and I sort of like I did this in a non-scalable way. Is like typically comes across, right. So it's not an organization wide an established process to drive this alignment. It's like individuals who are really very proactive and things like that. They're going and taking initiative and they're trying to do some sort of an initial pilots and things like that, and then try to prove value, and then basically once they find result, then like it becomes a larger, well established program, right? So while it's good for pilot and things like that, so again sticking back to that alignment part, right? How is there a different way to bridge the gap? Maybe it's top down, it might be difficult, but like whose job should it be to like make sure through process the alignments are in place?
Yeah, that's a good question. It also depends a lot on how big your org is, because the
Hmm.
CEO of a seed stage startup is very different from a CEO role at Fortune 100. But I think for it to really work well at scale, you do greatly benefit from top down alignment. Uh, here's the rub. It is hard, and it's not going to be right the first time. And so
Right.
if you don't have buy-in from folks to stick it out for an extended period of time, it's very unlikely that you'll get to a point where the story plays out.
Hmm.
And what I often find is the people who believe it won't work for them, or it didn't work for their company, or for the bad experience, they didn't stick it out long enough. And
Right.
oftentimes you don't have a choice, right? You have to hit these numbers on this timeline. And what you start
Right.
to find in programs that don't hit it, what you start to find is you have fundamental gaps in your understanding of your target market. You either
Hmm.
have the wrong target account list, or the wrong target personas, or the wrong messaging for your positioning, or the wrong product. You might have it as an organization, but it hasn't been well communicated. And so,
Right.
in my opinion, there's one aspect of this is whomever at the org that if it's a BU or a product line or whatever it is that owns the product and owns the
Hmm.
the plan of, hey, we're going to get this much revenue from this product in the market, that person
Hmm.
is probably the most important person to have bought in. And that person's also going to most naturally understand why they would be bought in on this, because they've
Right.
got the revenue goal, they've got the market, they've got the product, and they have to go get it. And what you're doing is helping them stand that up. So, so I think, top down buy in is certainly important. And my career grew mainly off the back of being recruited into companies where there was top down alignment. So there was somebody at the
Hmm.
top
Hmm.
who was at least promoting the idea of it. So it was certainly helpful for
Right.
me. But but if you can't get the top down alignment, it's probably a communication gap. In terms of what even are you talking about doing and why. But
Right.
there's no business leader in this world
Hmm.
who would not rather spend their money on the right people at the right account at the right time for the
Right.
right deals. I mean, they would all want to
Hmm.
do that. So if
Right.
if they don't want to run your ABM program, they don't understand. They're not understanding what you're asking
Hmm.
for. So,
Hmm. No, I think it makes sense. So, in terms of your engagements with your clients, right? So, what type of, generally speaking, the kind of customers or clients that you work with? And also, I wanted to follow up that question with the readiness part, right? What type of companies typically should start thinking about or wanting to do ABM? Should make sure that these are the number of things that has to be in place in terms of the hygiene before starting to think about ABM, right? Through all these initiatives that we are doing, so there's a lot of awareness towards ABM, right? Every small company, one member marketing team, so they are wanting to do ABM, right? So are they, can they do something like that, something like an ABM, or what?
yeah, that's a good. It's a good question. I always say it's vision, mission, goals, right? Or you will
Hmm.
sometimes hear as strategy, tactics, technology, whatever, however you like to think about it. But
Yeah.
the mission or strategy that is ABM, everyone should be thinking about that. Everyone should be thinking, what makes a good account a good account? What makes a good target audience a good target audience? What should I be
Hmm.
saying to those people? And
Hmm.
why should I be saying it to those people? We all
Yeah.
marketers, all businesses should be thinking about that. And at its core, account based marketing is a framework to help you write that down, help you come up with that. If you've never done that before and you got a technical background, you've never done marketing, you're not educated in marketing, well, ABM frameworks or ABM books or ABM case studies give you the kind of approach to take to start to answer those questions. And that's without buying anything. You're just thinking about who should I be targeting and why, what should I be saying to them. So that's where I believe it starts, and everyone should do that, no matter how big or small or early stage your company is. However, as you start to scale up from there and try to go generate demand, it is really hard to generate demand at scale if you haven't fundamentally answered the question of who is my best audience. And so if you're still shotgunning 3 or 5 different audiences, you're like, oh, sometimes they're here, sometimes, or you don't definitively know these are the best kinds of accounts for me to go hit, this is the best kind of person for me to go talk to. If you don't know that, then it's not a good time to scale that. What you should be focused on is doing the testing and the smaller pilots and the smaller efforts that you can do to start to learn that. And that really starts with conversations, either between you and customers or prospects, or you and your sales team, or you and customer success, because what you're trying to answer is what made somebody a good customer and why, and why would you want more customers like that? And so you can use your tactics and your data and your conversations and your processes to dial in on that. And as you get more confidence in that and you believe, okay, this is the right person for me to be targeting, and this is how I know it's the right person for me to be targeting, or the right account for me to be targeting, then you start to scale that up and start investing real dollars into that. And you know, ABM programs can get super expensive, but they can also be really scrappy. So it just depends on where you're at. But I would not tell someone to go buy a bunch of tech and hire a bunch of people and create a bunch of content if they haven't answered those questions. You know, so that's why I would say it's for everybody, depending on where you're starting. But as you scale that up, if you have nailed your product market fit and you feel really good, you know who you're after and why you're after them, that's where it's prime time to hit it hard. And every dollar you spend on account-based marketing versus any other approach that you're taking is gonna pay out at higher ROI if you're following the process, you know, and you actually have the answers to those questions.
Right. Great. Are there any interesting ABM campaigns, right, from your experience, that you would like to highlight, right? Challenges or anything that you were able to overcome, right? So which people can sort of learn from it and then implement in their programs.
Yeah, it's a big question. You know, as we said at the beginning of the call, I've been doing account-based programs for 8 years, I guess now. A long time with a lot of programs, and I'm running it anytime. Yeah, I know. I'm right. So I'm trying to think, like, how do you pick that apart, you know? But so I would say that I'm just trying to think what the best use case is. Well, I ran a program once as a practitioner where we sat down with the GM of the business unit and the product manager of the business unit and the salesperson of the business unit, and we answered those questions. It was actually one of my first pilots many years ago, and we came up with like 46 target accounts that we needed to win to get to be successful. In 10 months, we had closed a deal at 100% of the target accounts in 10 months.
Wow.
And the lesson there was collaborate at the highest level, be focused and narrow, you know. And then I think in that case, we did a lot of test and iteration. I mean, the tactics were ads and emails and webinars and trade shows, all kinds of stuff like that we were doing. But that first conversation with the GM and the product manager or the sales team and saying, hey, I think this could work for you. You know, we could go get these accounts, tell me what you want, who you want to get after, and then hitting that hard. We built amazing traction on that, you know, so that's kind of a story that comes to mind. But, you know, outside of that, I think sitting down with key salespeople who own strategic accounts, you know, I can think of many times we've done this, who own strategic accounts and know those accounts, been after those accounts for years and really are deep on those accounts, and really asking them, what would you want to know about this account? And what would you do with that information if you knew it about that account? And then using that to help you dial in your account base. That's also an excellent approach, and I've seen that play out many times and close a lot of significant business. More recently, we did that work with the client, and they had 10 targets to start up this effort, and in 3 months, we had closed 3 of them. And
Hmm.
doing exactly that. What would you want to know? How would you use it? Why would you do it? And then dialing in all the messaging for that. So I think the lesson learned for me has been probably start small, ask those questions, talk to those people, understand why they would want to know what they would want to know, and then do the things that you can do to get those messages in front of those people and collect that data.
Hmm. Okay, cool. Today, when you, let's say, some client of yours, a prospect of yours, right, start engaging with you, so what are the different steps or phases that you take them through, especially those who are new to ABM, right? So how do you like sort of progress them and mature programs? How do you, so
Yeah,
you talked about scrappy ABM a little bit, right? And you talked about starting small. So, but as a playbook, right? So what do you guys sort of, how do you approach it?
absolutely. It all follows basically the same process. You start out by answering those fundamental questions. We call it the foundations, and so you're trying to get captured the target, what makes a good ideal customer profile. Trying to capture who's the ideal persona or personas, and what's your positioning in that context. And this is not for your company. This is for the campaign. So a
Hmm.
campaign is basically you have a unique audience that has a unique problem that you have a solution for. So you might have a solution that's a product, and that might be a solution for 3 different audiences or 3 different problems. The campaign
Yeah.
is one of those problems, one of those audiences. So after
Hmm.
you nailed down, all right, here's the problem I'm going to go solve today for this audience. Here's who has that problem. That's your foundation of positioning persona, customer profile. So from there, then we do the market research to find the target accounts. And in my opinion, particularly in the United States, if you are running this, you should know 100% of your targets before you start. And most likely, you're going to have the name of the person you want to convert before you start. Because the data
Yeah.
is available. So we do that work. We basically canvas the market, and then we go into a phase of building messaging and content. So if you have the channels and the tactics and the tech, and you did that homework, you should take the opportunity to say something specific to that audience. So most of the
Hmm.
time,
Hmm.
people's content or website or whatever is not specific to that audience. So we take a few weeks
Right.
to design the messaging and the content that needs to be designed and built for that use case. And so that's kind of the next step. And then once we have that messaging, and it's important, that message does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be directionally accurate, because you're going to change the message
Hmm.
as you learn from the audience.
Right.
A lot of people try to get that content perfect, and it's a waste of time. It's a total waste of time to have perfect content
Hmm.
in your first go. And so then once you have your content, then we go to market. And so a goal is to understand, do I have visibility into those targets or not? Can I even see them? Do I know if I'm putting a message in front of them or not? And you know that from your analytics or the tactics that you're running or email or ads or whatever. Am I getting it in front of them? That's kind of the first main
Yeah.
need. Then you need to understand, okay, what's in front of them? Are they engaging with it? And so you're starting to understand, okay, what did they engage with, and which message resonated, which email, which subject line. So you start that's that first layer of optimization of, could I even put it in front of them, and did they even interact with it? Because if you can't get it in
Yeah.
front of them, you can't do anything. And
Hmm.
if they don't interact with it,
Hmm.
it doesn't
Hmm.
matter. So that's where you're starting.
Right.
And in parallel to that, as they're interacting with that, you start collecting signals from these target accounts. And you can have a very mature stack that can collect tons of signals, like 10 data and stuff like that. Or you can have a very simple stack, like a free or very low cost marketing automation, like HubSpot or something. We're just picking up, like, are they on your site? Or even Demandbase has a free script that you can put on your site to track IP based traffic on your site, right? So then
Hmm.
you're just understanding the efficacy of, are those accounts engaging back or not? And so you're trying to dial all your stuff into maximizing the likelihood that when you get the message in front of them, they engage back. Because from there, moving forward, now you have signals. And what you're trying to do is use those signals to prioritize where you're spending your time, energy, money. So the next kind of set of activity is pointing your next layer of tactics like email automation or maybe more ads or maybe social ads or something like that at accounts where you know there are signals. So and the goal there is to drive more signals. And so you're trying to pick up specific people are interacting or specific geographies are interacting or whatever, or specific lead scores are picking up on your system or whatever. You start driving that active engagement where people are actively engaging back. So that's kind of the middle of the tactics, and you're optimizing the rate at which you do that, and you're doing the account discovery to add more names into that pot, basically. And then as you're doing that, I think a critical piece of the puzzle is harvesting those signals. And to do that well, you need a human whose job it is to take advantage of those signals. And this is where some people fail. They rely on their existing staff or their existing AEs or some fractional role internally where this isn't actually their job. They rely on that person to do it. And what you need is a person whose job is to harvest those signals. And that is what I refer to as a business development rep or a BDR. Not everyone calls them the same thing, but that's what I would call it. So if you have people on staff like a BDR whose job is to harvest those signals, and then what you're doing is prioritizing that they are spending their time wherever the most signals are being generated. And so as you do that effort, you're trying to understand, are you reaching them, the audience? Are they engaging? Are they converting or not? And as you're doing that, you're collecting feedback from your BDR team of when you talk to that person, what do they say? Was there a budget issue? Was there an authority issue? Was there a need issue? Was there a timing issue? What were the objections that you ran into when you tried to reach that person? Right. You take those objections and dial in who you're targeting and what you're saying. Out of that, you're generating meetings for your sales team, and those sales teams are sitting down and having conversations with people and their target accounts, and they're going to tell you if that was a good meeting or not. And if it wasn't, you need to change what you were saying and doing. And if it was, you need to do more of that. So that process is a iterative feedback loop to help you understand, say this, not that, talk to this guy, not that guy, point your efforts here, not there. And so that can be done with a very slim, very immature stack, and that can be accelerated and matured up by layering more tech, more channels, more tactics, where basically the outcome of that is more signals. And if you have more signals, then you can dial your efforts in further, and you can staff up more people to get after those signals. But if you have 1,000 target accounts and you start generating signals at 10 or 15 or 20, you can go after that. That's that you start it, and then as you mature the campaign, you get signals for more and more and more, and you're trying to get to a point where you're getting tons of signals. The last thing I'll say on this, and I'll stop. In my opinion, account-based marketing is about relationships. It's not about deals. It's not about revenue. It's about relationships. If your sales team gets relationships with the right people at the right account, you will get revenue. You will get revenue because you have a product that solves a problem that they have, and you have built that relationship, and they know you now. And when that problem arises, they talk to you, and you will help them out. That's what I believe ABM is doing. So what marketing is trying to deliver, if you want to call it marketing at this point, is more engagement to drive more relationships for your sales team or your company to have with the right people at the right accounts. And the reason why that's important is because in marketing, this effort cannot influence sales cycle times. Like, sure, maybe that's said the wrong way. You certainly can't accelerate sales cycle time, but you can't overcome the buying process. People still have to go through the buying process. And sometimes, especially in ABM, that could be a year-long process. So you can't expect your ABM program to be closing deals in the first month if your sales cycle is a year. So, but you should expect your ABM program to start generating those relationships early on. And that's what you're looking for. And the quality of those relationships, as evidenced by people at your company now know and are speaking with people at your target accounts company. And then from that you yield those opportunities. Because don't get me wrong, you need an opportunity and a pipeline and a revenue metric. I'm just saying that's not actually the goal. The goal is the relationship.
Awesome. Ton of insights there, right? So signals, signal harvesting, building relationships, and I think the outcome is like a deal, opportunity, or whatever. Great. I just wanted to have one last question on this before we get into your favorite subject. Uh, I think you recently spoke about doing one-to-one ABM, right, with low cost or little cost, right? Can you just expand on that or throw some light on what that approach
Yeah,
could look like?
yeah. I've talked about this a lot actually. And it's been learned over a long time. A lot of people helped me learn this, so I didn't come up with this
Mm,
entirely myself. But
sure.
if you think about what you're doing from a one-to-one perspective, what you're trying to do is maximize the relevancy of your message. Because the more
Mm,
relevant your message, the more likely you are to get engagement and convert somebody. And a lot of times this makes a lot of sense when there is a small set of accounts that are super critical for your business to win. You got to win these
correct.
accounts for your business to be successful.
Mm,
That's where one-to-one makes the most sense, unless you just have tons of money. One-to-one makes the most sense when there's a set of accounts that you are able to identify, that you're able to say, if I win these accounts, this is a huge strategic importance to my company. So a lot of times you find this at like VC-backed startups or scale-ups that are trying to go really fast, and they have to get a logo from one of these accounts to like be able to like be a viable going concern. So that's where you start to have that conversation. And so from a cost perspective, if you don't have any money but you have time, well, anybody can sit down and think about like that question with the sales team. What do you want to know about this target account, and why would you want to know it? And if you do that, how would that change what you state in that account? You start having that conversation. It's like, oh, well, I would want to know what their, I'm going to make this up, what their sustainability policy is and what their goals are for sustainability, because we sell a product that helps them achieve energy efficiency or whatever. So, whatever
mm,
that thing might be that you want to know, well, why would you want to know that? Well, because when I'm talking to this target role over here, I would tell them, we're going to help you achieve this. And I would want to know what their goals
mm,
are and what their timeline is and how much money they're spending on it. No, like whatever those things are, right? Well, if you
mm,
have time but no money, it's not hard to go research that account. Like you're looking on their site, you're looking in their 10Ks, you're looking at what their leaders are sharing on social, you're looking at, has your target been on a podcast, and they've been in an event, you're looking for those kind of things to help you understand, try to get the answers to those questions. And you can either do that yourself or you can outsource that. And if you want to go really low cost, I have many times outsourced this to like offshore teams where this is not expensive research if you're dialed in on what you're doing. I'm talking like $20 an account type of thing. And so, and that, I mean, you have to have the right team, but you can do it. So as you get those answers to those questions, the next thing you're doing is dialing in what you're saying to that account in the tactics and channels that you're running. So whether you're running ads on like LinkedIn because you don't have more expensive tech, or you're using tech like a Terminus, or if you want to dial back from that, maybe you're using tech like one of the lower cost ones like Rollworks or something like that helps you get in front of the audience, whatever you're doing to get in front. Or maybe you're not doing ads at all, you're just going straight to email, or maybe you're not doing ads, you're just reaching out on social, whatever it is that you might be doing. If you have the answers to those questions, you start saying specific things to that account in the context of those questions. And where you drive those people is to a page on your site or a landing page that is specifically for them. And I think an important part
mm,
of this is making it personal for them. So oftentimes we'll have pages where the salesperson who owns that account or that account relationship will have them do like a 30-second video and put that video on the page. It says, hey, target company, thanks for coming and check out our stuff. Here's why I think we're a good solution for the problems that you have. And if you did that research, you can speak to that specific problem that they have. So you
mm,
don't have to spend a lot of money, really, really anything if you're doing it yourself. to do that research, come up with that messaging, record that video of your sales dude, and put it on a web page. So that's where it starts. And then from there, you're trying to get people from that account to see that message. That's where you start spending money.
Right.
And there's lots of ways you can do that. I think we're all pretty familiar with those kinds of tactics. But the goal is, if your normal conversion rate here is like 2 or 3 or 4%, where for these kinds of tactics, and you're super specific, it's super dialed in, you know exactly what you're after and why, your conversion rates are going to go up substantially. And if you're paying attention to what you're learning along the way and what you're saying, you just start dialing it against that. So scaling that up, first of all, I recommend that you always start with 1 or 2, not more than 5, to start, because you're just trying to get your process nailed down. And I have a big presentation I did it at BBS the next couple of years that there's a recording of that basically walks through the process. But you're trying to get that process down. Once you know how to go do that research, what those questions are, how you want to tailor that, that's when you scale it up. And if you do it in the way I described, that's when you can start outsourcing the research and outsourcing the building of those messaging. And so when you can get somebody offshore to do that for 20, 30, $100 per account, then you can scale that. You can scale that in a big way. So that's if you attack one-to-one as it's an equation, and that equation is maximizing the relevancy of what you're saying and who you're saying it to, that's where it comes down to. It doesn't have to be expensive. And where it gets ridiculously expensive is when you haven't done that research and you're just blasting out generic messaging to one-to-one. You're not going to see a gain in that performance just because you spent more dollars on it, and that's where you start to see people losing money.
Right. I think that makes perfect sense. So it's all about like making sure you're relevant, and for you to be relevant, you need that research. And research is where maybe that's not the place where people are not spending a lot of time and maybe even money. And then, like, based on your experience, that's not going to be like a very costly affair that should not be not done. Right. So perfect. Okay, let's just switch gears and talk about your favorite subject.
Yeah.
And I think no podcast these days, right, go without talking about AI, and we will not be one of those who will not do, right? So I think you have some you've been talking about the influence of ChatGPT in ABM specifically, right? And I don't think anybody else is doing it in the context of ABM, more in general marketing, but not in ABM. So I'm curious to know what's your viewpoint, and I wanted to follow that question up with specific use cases, if you thought through or if you're experimenting or anything like that. Just give us your thought around this.
Yeah, happy to do that. So there's a lot of bad information out there on ChatGPT, and there's a lot of confusion on ChatGPT. And I think a lot of the confusion and bad information comes from basically, this is not going to sound the right way, but basically using it the wrong way. And what I mean by that is a lot of people interact with ChatGPT like it's a knowledge source, or they expect to be able to ask it a question and get an answer, and that answer is going to be right. And then they're surprised when it's wrong. And that is a fundamental disconnect in what ChatGPT is. ChatGPT is not a knowledge source. It is a language predictor. It's going to say, you use these words. Based on reading billions of words, the most likely words to come next that make sense based on the words that you used are these words. That doesn't mean they're the right words. That just means that linguistically they make sense and they sound good. And the more context you give it, the more example you give it, the more you dial that in, the more likely that the words it gets back to you are the words that you want. But if you don't give it any context or any instruction, who knows where you're going to get back? It might sound good, but it's probably wrong. So in terms of knowledge, it might not be wrong in terms of structure, but it is in terms of knowledge. And so if you come at it like that initially and treat it less like a knowledge source and more like a tool that's going to help you structure information in a way that you tell it, I think that's personally, I think that's a better place to start. I'm talking about ChatGPT specifically right now. There are other
Sure.
large language models
Mm-hmm.
out there, and there's other services and things like that. But even for the other ones that are paid out there, the only difference is that they've been trained or they've been given that context behind the scenes, and you just don't know it, or you don't see that. Right? That's the only difference in a free or paid, or like one that was built for marketing messaging specifically versus a generic one. It's just how it's trained, but the tech is the same tech, or generally speaking, the same tech.
Yeah, yeah.
So that being said, I know there's a long build up. Um, my view is that GPTs can be used to structure information very quickly. So if you have a process that you follow, like what we just talked about with one-to-one, and you know what that process is, go get these, or I have this information, and from this information, I want to figure out what are their goals, what's their sustainability, whatever, that type of thing. Well, you can feed that information into GPT with a set of questions and have it extract the answers for you. Well, if you do that one off, like you just go to the company's website and cut and paste the content and put it in, that's not that much faster than doing it yourself. Maybe it's a little bit faster, but it's not that
Yeah.
much faster than doing it yourself. One caveat there is you might know exactly what you want, but your intern or your lower cost employee or the person offshore who you just hired, they may not know anything about what you want. So one place where GPT can jump in is if you have working prompts with working context and working question and give that instruction to someone else to go do it, that will make you faster and is scalable. But it gets way more interesting when you have a machine do it. And so where I think the rubber really needs to road is combining GPT with something like Python and running it through scripts. And so you might be referencing this. I'm not sure if you saw this one out in the world or not, but I did this use case around giving it, you can basically set up a CSV of all your target accounts, the URLs of your target accounts. And you can set up questions that say, go look at these target accounts and answer these questions. Like, do they do this? Do they have that? Is this on our site? Whatever. And using GPT and Python and the API, you can have your computer go out to that website, read every word on its website, look for these things, and then have GPT look at that information and answer questions using reason on for you. And you can do it asynchronously. So I've done this with like 2,000 accounts, and it'll be doing like 100 at a time and just blowing through these sites, looking for information and answering these questions. And that is powerful because the use case here is for verifying your target account list from an ICP perspective. Let's say there's a really niche requirement. Like this account is a great account, but only if they have X. And that's not something you can buy. Whatever that thing is not something you can buy from Zoom or whatever. You have to know that. Well, using that process like that to go skim websites and read for that thing can make that way more doable than having humans sit there and look one by one, saving yourself tons of time. So I mean that's just one use case, but the point is that if you understand what you're trying to achieve and you can write that down and then basically outsource it to GPT, then it's going to speed you up a huge way. So that's just one use case. There's many others like writing your ads and then iterating those ads based on your personas, or personalizing the landing pages based on the input text that you have, or whatever it might be. There's many use cases, but I would just encourage people to think of ChatGPT as a tool that will help them process information a lot faster than they can do as a human against whatever you tell it to look for. But you have to be explicit about what you tell it to look for, and you have to point it at information that's good information. Otherwise, you're not going to get what you want.
So I think it's just going back to the previous question or discussions we had, right? So creating that you want it to be relevant, and for you to be relevant, you need that research to be done. And how can you use something like a ChatGPT to collect it, and then how you process that could still be human intelligence as of now, right? Is there a way that you've thought through about a way to automate that process also? So what we are talking about could lead up into a tool someday,
Oh
right?
yeah.
But I'm just wondering, based on what you talked about, right? So what are the downstream activities that you could do based on the initial research that you collect, right? Just by web crawling, for example. Could it like build a campaign, for example, or at least give the structure, like what could be
Yes.
messaging for each of those campaign build segments? Is that the line of thought that you have?
That's what I'm already doing. Yes, it
Mm,
absolutely can be done. If you have the
mm,
process and you know what you want to do and you know the order you want to do it in and you have the right questions and you engineer it the right way,
right,
have the right automation,
right.
absolutely. Because I think where people get hung up is they look at output from ChatGPT and they're like, I would never do it like that. That's garbage. Well, then you
Mm,
need to be more specific on how you want it to do it. And this is
right.
probably a controversial statement, but if you take the time, really take the time, and you iterate and iterate and iterate, you can get to a point where what you're asking GPT is so specific that it's exactly how you would do it. And the only way that's going to
Mm,
happen is if you take the time to iterate through your prompts to get it to be exactly how you would do it. But it will
mm,
do it
mm,
exactly how you do it if you have written down
right,
exactly how you do it. So it takes
right.
time and iteration, and you have to know what you're doing when you're engineering the prompts, and it's a lot of learning to get there. But but it absolutely can do it exactly how you would do it if you train it to do it that
Mm,
way. So that being
right.
said, if you have a very clear process that's very much like do this, 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 and you have that written down, and you know exactly what you're doing in each step,
Mm,
100%,
mm,
100% ChatGPT can process that information, particularly if it's
mm,
language-based information. Like I would not say that for math-based stuff. Like if you have got to do a regression analysis or you got to do some kind of critical math analysis or something like that, I would not use GPT to do that. Not that people don't do that. I just
mm,
wouldn't do that. But like
mm,
another
mm,
example of this to get your head around it is a lot of people's websites generate a lot of inbound leads, right? You get tons of inbound leads from your website, and you have it
right,
says
right.
name, company, and whatever notes they put in. And you'll drop a press release, and the next day you have 1,000 leads that came in on your website, and now you got to go read all these leads, and like 90% of them were trash, but somebody had to sit there and read through them. Well, if you
That's right.
know what is it that your person is looking for and why are they looking for that, you absolutely can automate that with GPT to have GPT go read all of them and use reason and your process to say, oh, this is a good lead or a bad lead. And so that's a very simple use case, but it demonstrates how to think about it. Don't have it look at
Mm,
all 1,000 leads. Have it look at one
right.
lead at a time because it can do it
Mm,
asynchronously and it can do it in a second. And you can have all 1,000 of them done in like 2 minutes versus the human sitting there
mm,
going row by row by row. So I use that example because it's a simple process of accelerating your efforts using GPT. But what you just described, in my opinion, is totally possible of basically
mm,
having build the whole thing for you if you know how you want to build and you're super specific.
right. Mm, very interesting. Prompt engineering, and I think that's what like you referred to, right? So what are the skill sets that are required? I think this is an emerging kind of a role, right? It's not completely understood, right? I think it's been loosely used, right? So what kind of skill set, sticking to the marketing function, right? So who's doing a certain job today would be more apt for doing something like this?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about this a few times over the last many months here since this dropped into the world. I think one of the reasons why it was
Right.
so exciting for me, and I think why it's so exciting for marketers, is because if you're a growth marketer or a digital marketer, you have been doing A/B testing and looking at the results and adjusting for a
Mm,
long time, right? Like
mm,
that is bread and butter for
mm,
marketers and digital marketers. And it's
yeah.
basically what you're doing with prompt engineering is you're writing two ads, testing them, taking the winning one, writing another one alongside it,
Mm,
testing them, taking the winning one, and when you're done, you have the best
mm,
possible ad, and you do that over time. We're doing the same thing with prompt engineering. like with an ad, you always have a headline,
Okay.
you always have the text, you always have the CTA, you gotta have less than 110 characters, whatever. Those parameters that are writing an ad, same thing with emails and things like that,
Mm.
and the way you think about testing for that is almost exactly the same skill set for the prompt. That's different parameters and different like foundational knowledge, but it's the same. It's the same fundamental approach. So if you think like that, and you are in a great position to do prompt engineering. And so prompt engineering itself is kind of loaded because the tech moves so fast and it's iterated so fast that tips and tricks for prompt engineering go stale pretty fast. And that's why your time, if you're going to learn this, is better spent understanding fundamentally how does it work? How does the tech work? And fundamentally, your time is better spent understanding how do I frame up the problem that I want the bot to solve for me? That's where the money is at, is how do I think about the problem that I need the bot to solve for me? And why am I and why is that problem structured in that way? And the bot will go solve it. Today, you still need to understand prompt engineering. Tomorrow, as in the future, probably less important, but you will definitely need to understand how do I frame up the problem I'm trying to solve with GPT. So there's lots of good research and reading on that. But outside of that, if you want to get into prompt engineering specifically, my favorite like simple aggregated resource is OpenAI has something I think it's called the cookbook. OpenAI has a cookbook, I think is what it's called, and it's on GitHub, but you can find it on OpenAI's website. And it's where they have aggregated all of this research into a single place of how to approach prompt engineering. And it goes from very, very simple to super advanced. And as you kind of alluded to, there's a ton of research on this. And you can take this super high level, or you can go into like deep, heavy research that's super technical. But the point is that it 100% matters how you engineer the prompt for sure. And my experience is every minute that you put into learning how to write the prompt will pay back 100-fold in the results that you get. So spend the time to learn how to write the prompt, because if you plan to use it, you'll get the payback.
Excellent. Daniel, I think this has been like last hour or so. It's been an interesting discussion, ton of things that we discussed. Thank you so much. And I think we can keep going, right? Especially on the AI front. But maybe we'll just regroup again, right? And then
Sure.
talk more about, and I'm sure a lot of things would have changed by then, right?
Yeah.
But once again, thank you so much. If you have any parting comments, thoughts, and also preferred channel for people to reach out to you, please go ahead and then share.
Yeah, I'll definitely hit me on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing this kind of stuff, and I'm always open to sharing more. So hit me on LinkedIn. And I guess my final thoughts are not really going to be surprising to fellow marketers, but stay curious. Keep learning. That's the whole thing. ABM, GPT, the whole thing is test and learn, and that's where you get the growth. So keep going, and that's really my top advice.
Cool. All right.